Good morning. Welcome to the Sunday edition of the Essential 2020 Guide to Self-Awareness, Self-Control, and Self-Confidence, where we're teaching 20 trainable behavior skills that unleash greatness. We are how many in are we? Is this number 5? Let's see. Let's make sure we're tracking here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the 6th one. We're on the 6th skill, which is the skill of empathy. I'm massively excited for this skill for so many different reasons, but two of them stand out to me. And that is, first, that empathy is the single most important behavior skill in any type of relationship. If you didn't know, empathy is above all other traits. It's the number one trait that attracts one person to another. And so if you are in sales, if you are in recruiting, if you are in coaching, if you are in leadership, if you are in any position where your ability to influence and form bonds and connections with people affects the performance of whatever craft you're engaging in, empathy is the most important skill for you to have. If you are a parent, if you have a significant other, if you have relationships in your life that have a leadership role or that are just important to you, if friendships and the bonds of those friendships are important to you, if family is an important part of your life, empathy is the most important trait and skill that you can build and work on and craft and hone to strengthen those ties and those bonds. Empathy is an incredible moneymaker. Empathy is an incredible difference maker when it comes to the performance of sports teams, and it is massively misunderstood. And that's the second reason. The second reason I'm excited for today is that empathy I think one of the reasons that empathy gets a bad rap and a bad name in a lot of places, or at least it gets a name, an association, a belief that it is soft, it's weak, it's fragile, it's fuzzy, is that people think they have to give something up to be empathetic. They don't understand that what the genuine nature of empathy is. And the reason for that and why I like what it is that we do is, you think about this for a second. When have you practiced empathy? When were you taught the depth and mechanics of empathy? How often do you train empathy? And how skillfully do you train empathy? Where do you get your reps of empathy? Not just your experience, right? Not just, I feel bad when somebody tells me that their dog died, or I feel bad when somebody tells me they lost their job during this, or, when somebody gets cancer or somebody passes away that I know, I send them a message and I say thoughts and prayers, right? That's not empathy, and those aren't reps. Everybody does that. When do you get reps and training and depth of understanding in how to empathize and the role of empathy in the functional relationships of your life? And the truth is, most of us don't get that kind of training. Most of us haven't had that kind of education. We don't practice this in the true sense of practice. And so this is a great moment to do that. So I'm curious today on a Sunday, this is the first time we've done this on a Sunday, and I'm expecting a light crowd today because Sunday morning, a lot of times that's for family or other things that people are doing, and these schedules are really interesting on how they're all folding out, and they're largely unpredictable right now. So we're going to keep going. We're going to go through this. As always, you can send your Q&A over. For me, it's on right here on this side. If you have a question, start it with Q&A. And then write your question out. That way I can easily find them and see them. And we're going to dive into empathy. So here's what empathy is. Empathy is the simple skill of finding out what's important to the other person and making it important to you in a way they can feel and value. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a choice. Empathy is not a feeling, it's an action. It's not an emotion, it's a decision. Okay? This is the first entry point distinction that sends people left or right, down a path that is in fact empathy and down a path that is not empathy. That's where people get confused. Empathy is not a feeling. It's a decision. It's a choice. And people confuse the feeling of empathetic, this natural thing that shows up, we feel bad when somebody tells us that they have some kind of a disease or virus or sickness. Oh my gosh, right now with the corona, somebody says, oh, they caught corona, or my dad has it, or my mom has it, or whoever. And immediately, like, your heart goes out to them. And you're like, oh, I feel for you. And we call that empathy because we have this feeling. And to some extent, maybe not, but even if that is empathy, it's not the important, skillful empathy. Because everybody feels bad when things like that happen. Everybody puts their heart out to people when that happens. Empathy is when you're choosing your way into that. So that's the first piece, is to have empathy, is to choose it. And how you choose it is this, and let's break this down. It's to find out what's important to the other person, then make that important to you in a way they can feel it and in a way they value. Let's break down that simple definition. Let's start with the most basic. And here's the action, or the choices and the action that need to flow from a position of empathy. The first is you find out. It is the active process of finding out what's important to them. It means you have to seek it. You have to look for it. In order to look for it and seek what's important to somebody else, you have to either set aside or get your attention off of what's important to you, or at least hold them together and look for somebody else's. The second thing you have to do, and this is the demonstration, is as you find out, you have to make it important to you in a way they feel it and in a way that they value. So once you find out what's important to somebody, then you have to make that thing you found, or those things that you found, important to you in a way that can be recognized, felt, and understood by the people you are empathizing with. Because if you're just having your own internal experience, right? You see somebody and inside, you feel bad for them on the inside. That might be good for you, and that might be something for you, but it's not empathy, because empathy is something that has to not only be chosen, but also has to come and be demonstrated to the people we are empathizing with, right? So that's the core key, right? So the next piece that I want to make sure that we're getting is, in order to do that, right, to be skillful in finding out, to be skillful in making it important, and to be skillful in doing those two things in a way that the people we're interacting with are recognizing, feeling, and valuing, that's a skill that requires understanding. It requires practice, it requires training, and it requires actually getting an education around how do I do that, right? Especially when we start extending where we need to be empathetic and who we need to be empathetic for, and the different kinds of people that we need to be empathetic with, the different forms of it based on their styles and how they're like or unlike us. The purpose of empathy, right? The purpose of empathy is to create understanding and connection. That's the purpose. That's the core of empathy. The core element of empathy, or the reason for it, and this is why empathy is the number one most attractive trait, again, in sales, leadership, influence, politics, romantic. When you can empathize, it's the number one most attractive trait. It creates understanding and connection. So the lens through which to see empathy is not how emotional do I need to get with people, right? And I think that's where a lot of people go. They think of empathy and they think, I got to get crying with people, or I got to get soft and hugging with people. And no, Put that aside, okay? That's not what we're talking about. Here's the role of empathy. Who do I need to have a clear and tight understanding with and a deep and strong and stable connection with? Who do I need that with? And wherever you answer, I need this kind of, I need great understanding between me and this person, and I need a really strong connection between me and this person. Whoever you answer that for, yes and yes, that's where empathy needs to exist. And empathy is the bonding agent, right? It's the magnet and the glue that pulls those things together. And through that, everything about that relationship is going to flow. And through that, all of the other elements that strengthen and bond and keep that relationship tight are going to flow first through the skill of empathy, all right? So if you want to influence somebody, if you want someone to be drawn to you, if you want them to trust you, right? If you want them to remember you, empathy is where you start. So 3 things for empathy: self-awareness around it, self-control with it, and then self-confidence in it. What are we paying attention to? Number 1, right? And I'm just making sure, again, I want to make sure that I'm walking through and guiding. And again, you see the notes that I'm taking on the very things that I wrote, which I actually appreciate and love here from this guidebook. The first thing around self-awareness of empathy is knowing that, and then again, watch how this leads into self-control. It's knowing that empathy is not a feeling. The most important part of self-awareness and empathy is that your feelings are not the guide for your empathy. Your decisions are. So here's the simplest decision you can have in self-awareness. And I'm going to keep this really tight today because I don't want to get bogged down in the details because it's already messy enough with emotions. So we're going to be very tight in the teaching today and jump into Q&A. Self-awareness is this. When it comes time to interact with somebody, I want you to simplify your empathy, right? And frankly, don't even, if calling it empathy gets you kind of clogged up, don't call it empathy. Just raise this simple self-awareness question in your mind. 1, I do care about this person and what's important to them, and I'm going to find out. That's 1. Or 2, I don't care about what's important to this person, and I don't want to find out. Those are the 2 choices. I care about what's important to this person, and I want to find out. I don't care about what's important to this person, and I'm not going to find out. If you're not doing that, then you're allowing your emotions largely to dictate and then therefore determine where your empathy is, and you'll believe that your emotions justify whatever answer you came up with. And you push your choice away. And what I want you to do is I want you to stay tight and take responsibility for the decisions you are making. If you don't empathize, if you don't care, it's because you're choosing not to. Anytime you don't care about somebody, it's not because of your emotion. It's because of your decision. You need to own that like I do. Take responsibility, take ownership, and state your choice. I care and I'm going to find out. I don't care and I'm not going to find out. You need to have self-awareness of the decisions that you are making. Because if you're not going to find out and you're not going to empathize, that means that you're not going to understand and you're not going to connect. And so when that person is turned off by you, when they don't want to listen to you, when they're uninterested in your perspective, when they're frustrated and irritated with you because you're disconnected, because you don't understand, because you didn't make the choice to find out what mattered to them, you can say, well, of course they ended up in this perspective. Of course they ended up to that spot. Look at the choices that I made. That's the natural flow of the consequences, right? So that's the number 1 thing in self-awareness. Empathy is not agreement. It's understanding. That's it. Empathy is not agreement. It's understanding. So on self-control, anybody can empathize when they feel it. Most people do. Anybody who feels an emotional draw, pull, connection, anybody who you come up and you talk to me about football or discipline or surfing or snowboarding or tattoos, or you come up and talk to me about DMGB, you come up and talk to me about those things, I'm going to be right there with you. But you come up and you talk to me about what's important to you that is not naturally and immediately emotionally interesting and important to me, now I have a choice to make. I don't have an existing emotional bank that is connected to that, but I can recognize it's important to you. Now is when my empathy is uniquely rare and valuable. Empathizing on the things everybody else already gets emotional and empathizes about is not useful or unique for you to create the kinds of connections that make a big difference. Everybody already does that. Where empathy comes to play is, can you connect with people in ways that most other people don't? Can you be understanding in ways that most other people aren't? Can you choose to find out what's important to people who aren't like you, to people who disagree with you, to people who think differently than you do, to people who maybe hold different standards than you do? Can you find if you're a Republican, can you choose to find out what's important to the Democrat neighbor who has a different perspective than you? And can you understand and connect around what's important to him or her differently than what's important to you? Most people, it's not that they can't, it's that they choose not to. They look at somebody and they allow their emotions of dislike for an opinion to dictate where they go. And they lose self-control because they don't own the choice. So, if you don't have empathy, it's because you are choosing not to have it. This is the core understanding that we have got to have. If you don't have it, it's because you choose not to have it. You are choosing something else. If you want empathy, you can have it and get it across to someone at any point, but you have to choose it, and then you got to act on it. Responsibility and ownership, okay? On the self-awareness side, again, just looking at some of my notes that I wrote over on the worksheet side of this, I want to make sure I'm passing on. Oops, I think I hit a button here. Self-awareness, what you can do from a mindset perspective, and you've obviously heard it here throughout, disassociate the word empathy and the sensation that you have with it from anything even remotely connected to soft or weak, or feeling like by empathizing that you're sacrificing something else important, like standards or truth or honesty or toughness. It's none of those things. So you and we all need to disassociate empathy from anything remotely connected to weakness, caving, sacrifice, or anything even close to that. Right? That's the huge self-awareness piece that we've got to pull in. On self-control, I will make this point. It's so important in practice and training and then in real life to choose to empathize and understand people who aren't like you. Again, I think it's most important to empathize when you don't like somebody, because emotionally, when you don't like someone for whatever reason, and we all have it, when you don't like someone, we're already emotionally primed to judge them, undermine their arguments, not agree with them, think that they're wrong, be frustrated when they are right, and not want to admit when they're right. We're primed to make really bad decisions and very blind perspectives when we don't like somebody. So therefore, it's most important to find out, when you don't like somebody, that's when it's most important to find out what's important to them and then make it important to you in a way they can feel and recognize, because that's how you understand and connect with somebody. Because look, if we reverse this, if you don't like somebody and you disagree with their perspective, if you haven't empathized and you're not understanding of them because you haven't really looked at them, you're in no position to criticize them or disagree with them in any credible way, because you haven't done the work to actually genuinely understand them at a real level. And you're so disconnected, and you're so selfishly myopic. Not judging you, just this is what we get, right? We get really selfishly myopic and we don't understand their perspective, that next thing you know, you're disagreeing with a picture you've painted of them in your head and you're projecting it onto them. And so that's why empathizing is so important, is it actually helps you understand the people that you disagree with better so that you can be more clear about where you're not really disagreeing, you just see the same scenario differently, which is okay, or you see the same things but you value them differently. And now all of a sudden you're just in a much better position to treat them like a human being than some caricature that we've created in our heads. And I think we could use a lot more of that in the world. And the last piece around believing in yourself with empathy. When you empathize with people, you're not going to lose yourself. Right? By empathizing with people, you're not sacrificing your standards. You're not sacrificing your beliefs. You're not sacrificing your values. You are in fact connecting yours to theirs. That's why this is so powerful. You're not going to appear or come across through empathy. If you're finding out what's important to somebody else and then making that important to you in a way they can feel and recognize, you are not going to come across as soft, fragile, wishy-washy, fuzzy. You're not going to come across like that. You're going to come across humble, kind, considerate, attention, valuable. You're going to come across curious. These are traits that are attractive to other people. People love to get that from somebody, okay? And if you're giving that to people and you're the source of that to people, that makes them feel good. And now that good feeling came from what source? From who? From you. Now there's that bond. So you're not going to lose yourself. You're actually going to deepen yourself. And you're going to deepen people's capacity to see you and understand you and connect with you. And you can be that source of those things for people. So those are the core things that I wanted to make sure that we got across. Is it's a choice. It's finding out what's important to somebody else, making it important to you in a way they can feel and recognize. You'll notice I've said that about 15 times. That means it's important. You have to choose, right? Self-awareness from the beginning. I care and I'm going to find out, or I don't care and I'm not going to find out. Make your choice. Once you've made your choice, self-control says if you don't feel it and you're not in it, it's because you're not choosing it. And you have to own the fact that I'm not empathizing and connecting and understanding because I'm choosing not to. And that really helps you from deceiving yourself. And it also makes you responsible and puts you on the hook for the actions, the decisions you're making and the actions you're engaging in, and then the consequences that those deliver, which we all have to stay tied to and cause and effect. And then self-confidence. Empathizing does not mean sacrificing anything about yourself. It does not mean letting go of your perspectives, your understandings, your opinions. It is simply learning how to recognize what is going on in somebody else and then helping bond you and connect you with a lot more people, sometimes like you, sometimes kind of not like you, sometimes not like you, a lot unlike you, and being that source of kind, curious, humble, good feelings that they then attach to you as being the source, and creates a lot better connections. So we'll jump into some Q&A. I appreciate you guys staying in here for this one because this one is super, super important. I really cannot overstate. You want to make a lot of money in life, get great at empathy. You want to win a lot of games. If you're a coach, get great at empathy. You want to build a great sales team and be an amazing leader, get great at empathy. You want to build a great family. You want to be great with your kids. Like this is, I don't have teenagers yet. Mine are 3 and 6 months, but I was a teenager and I work with a lot of kids. And you want to bond with kids, with your kids. You want to make the process of raising your kids fantastic. Listen and find out what's important to them and make those things important to you. This is the biggest problem people do with millennials. All they do is look at millennials and judge them and criticize them and call them entitled. And then they placate them. They're condescending towards millennials of, oh, you need everything explained why. And next thing you know, that they've spent no time actually genuinely trying to find out what's important. They treat them like this monolith of 75 million people, and they're all the same if you're 24. And so it's no wonder this disconnection happens. And I put the responsibility on the older generations, not on the 20-year-olds. Right? It's our job to empathize and connect and realize and understand. Right? We've got the more years of maturity and experience that ought to be showing up like this. So this is, if I could go like the next 20 days straight of just saying, pause here, go practice this for the next month, as deep and as thoroughly as you can, I would. That's absolutely what I would do if I had the power to control that. But I don't, so we're going to keep moving forward these behavior skills. All right. Questions. Any chance we are offering a new apparel with this DMGB shirt? Yes, this was a team-issued shirt from one of my clients where they went with DMGB for their theme for the year, and this is awesome. So this one's not for sale. We are going to be doing new apparel. This whole situation has slowed all of that down. So once this quarantine and lockdown starts to lift, we'll start rolling out some new apparel stuff here, hopefully very soon. All right, more questions. Yeah, empathy. Dan Siegfried talking about empathy reps for me is working with my corporate partners who have objectives that I play a part in achieving. I can choose to just listen and do, but listening to a point where they know that I get it. Yeah, absolutely. How does empathy and all 20 skills connect with E plus R equals O? So you can think of all of these skills as skills of your response, right? And really actually skills of the full E plus R equals O system, because say, for example, observation. The skill of observation is largely how you are seeing E plus R equals O unfolding in your day-to-day and in spectrums of your life. And so all of these skills are skills. Here's how I think of it. I think of it like this. Every skill in this 2020 guide is a skill to help you better and faster identify the outcomes that you want, or outcome in the moment, right? Because you can think of this momentarily, or you can think of this more strategically and big picture. Every skill, all 20 of these, are skills to identify the outcome, see and embrace the event that we are in, and then identify, choose, and engage in a disciplined response. That's how all of these skills work. It's either one or all of those things together. That's how I feed these things in. So they all directly interact with and engage through E plus R equals O as I think of it as the application mechanism, right? I think of it as the application system, and it's really just about what does this skill do. Let's take empathy. If a client is the E, or a prospect is the E, or my wife is the E, or my son is the E, my ability to empathize is my ability to see that E clearly. What is important about this situation and what's important to my wife, my son, my client, this prospect? And then can I identify and connect with what's important to them in a way they feel and recognize? That's where the skill of my response comes in. So empathy is really about the E and the R, seeing it and then actually demonstrating empathy for what I'm seeing in the particular circumstance. That's how empathy engages and interacts. How do I balance being empathetic, showing understanding with coaching and mentoring to offer advice, or how to handle situation? There's two things. If you're familiar with my teachings and what I've said before, you've heard me say the phrase, never allow raising your empathy to lower your expectations. And I believe in that. I think this is one of the false choices that people make. They believe that bringing up empathy means you have to bring down toughness, clarity, truth, saying hard things. And it's not true. So raise empathy and raise expectations. Okay, you can do both at the same time. Just because I'm empathizing doesn't mean I'm not going to be hard on you. Right? Like, you can do both. Literally, you can do both. And just because I need to be hard on you doesn't mean I have to let go of empathy. So one of the things that you can do, and who asked this question? Alan. Alan, one of the things that you can do is, as you find out what's important to somebody, one of the easy ways to empathize, because a lot of people don't like to get advice, especially if they're not asking for it. And so there's two things you can do if you're unsure. Number one is don't give advice. Once you've actually empathized and you've found out what's important to them and you've demonstrated it, tell them a story about an experience of yours about when you went through something that was similar. Okay, so it would be like this: maybe you just lost your job. Okay, and you've got something in mind that you have an impulse to tell advice. Okay, and you're now connecting, and maybe you think it was their fault, right? Maybe they'd lost their job because of things they did, and you've found out what's important to them, make it important to you, but in your head, you're like, you know what? I think they did this, this, and this, and that's why they lost their job. It was actually their fault. Now, you could give advice right away, but if that person had the self-awareness, lacked the self-awareness to get fired in the first place, they're probably not going to have the self-awareness to take your advice well. So here's what you could do. Rather than give them advice, you could say this. You could say, when I was 16, or maybe not teenager, but whatever. Tell your story. When my first job out of college, I had a boss who worked really hard to teach me a bunch of skills, and I never took that boss up on advice. And it wasn't until after I got fired that I actually looked back and realized that I was the reason that I got fired. But it actually took me getting fired to realize that, oh man, I was the problem in the relationship, and that changed me forever. That was a really big thing. And you leave it at that, right? Like no coaching, no advice, so you can use that for just tell your story. It's a subtle, sneaky, and more empathetic form of advice where you're just speaking from your experience. The second way you can do it is after you've earned the right to ask this question through empathy, you literally ask them, hey, are you interested in some perspective or advice from me? And it's yes or no. And if they say no, say cool. It's not your decision. Because if they're not interested, it doesn't help for you to deliver it. It's not about you, right? It's not about what you want to deliver. It's about what they're open to, what they want, and what they need. So that's how you do it. Empathy earns you the right to either pass a story and experience that the other person can make a decision about whether or not they use it and apply it, or earns you the right to ask if they want advice, perspective, or an opinion shared. That's how I would open it up. The I care or I don't care question is an early filter to move ahead or redirect right away. Yeah, it absolutely is. Alan, have I found key questions to ask that demonstrates high levels of empathy? Yeah, open-ended questions and listening, which is going to be, I'm pretty sure, tomorrow's skill. It is. I put this by design because the act of listening is the easiest, simplest, and most heavily weighted demonstration of empathy. Yeah, there's some questions, right? You can ask, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Start simple, right? It's not magic. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What was that like for you? A simple question. One I'll use a lot is when I find out where somebody grew up or something unique about where they grew up or how they grew up, I'll ask a very simple question. So for example, somebody will say, I grew up in Kansas. I'm like, oh yeah, and I'll say where, and they'll say Topeka, and I'll say, wow, huh? And like, what? And I'll ask this question: what was it like growing up in Topeka? And you just think about how simple that question is. What was it like growing up in Topeka? The person could talk for days about that. And they had a very real experience of growing up in Topeka. Now, it does two things. One, it's open-ended and lets somebody just share their experience and what's inside them, which is what everybody desperately wants to share. And number two is I grew up on the beach in Southern California. So whatever they're going to share to me is fascinating and interesting to me because I grew up so far from Topeka, it's not even funny. So I get a chance to let them express what they're already wanting to express and tell stories about what their life was like. And number two is it's interesting. It's different and interesting, and I can look and be like, I'm actually, because every time I ask that, I'm genuinely interested. And if somebody's from where I'm from, I ask the same question because I want to know how their experience was similar to or different than my experience growing up in the same environments. So those are simple questions. What are you thinking? What was that like? How your parents got divorced early in your life? How did that affect you? How did that shape relationships? How was that for you as a kid? Anything like that that's really simple. Those are great empathy questions because all it is giving the person a chance to express what's important to them. Any question that opens that up in a simple way is the easiest, most frictionless line too. Yeah, they could also be statements. Questions are better, the open-ended questions, the non-binary questions, the non-yes or no's questions. Q&A, where can I get the shirt? I wish these shirts were things that we have. These shirts are not for sale. This is actually from the Seattle Mariners, who we started working with this year, and super bummed they didn't get their season kicked off, but they're all in on DMGB. So these are Mariners official team issue shirts, and they are cool, right? They're awesome. So they did this design by themselves. I loved it. Appreciate it. Thank you guys for jumping in here. Eric, so empathy is a choice, not a feeling. Would I say that empathy properly done then creates feelings and emotions, both in the other person and in yourself? Feelings are the byproduct. That's exactly how it works. Here's the way to do it. And you'll see this in tomorrow's session in listening and how this works, but this is it. Empathy is a choice that creates the feeling, right? Empathy is the choice that creates the emotion that comes out of it. This is why I'm pushing everybody so hard to responsibility. If you're choosing not to find out what's important, there is something valuable in everyone. There is something useful in everyone. There is something worth connecting to and appreciating in everyone. If you don't see it, it's because you choose not to. Own that. So that's why we're pushing to this. So yeah, if you want to look at pick somebody that you really don't like. Pick somebody you really don't like a lot, that you think doesn't have redeeming qualities. And if you go dig and you find out what's important to them and you go look into them, you will find a bunch. You will. And you'll find things about them that are common. You'll find things that you share. You'll find things you both like and appreciate and have joy in. You'll find them. It doesn't matter who it is. So if you're not seeing it, it's because you're choosing not to. And if you want to choose not to, that's okay. But do so with ownership and do so with responsibility for the choice that you make. And yes, when you do empathy right, you choose your way into it and the feeling happens on the back end as a byproduct. The feeling is not the front end that pulls you into the empathy. It's the consequence of empathy. Is the echo chamber world increasing partisanship environment? Is there a way to champion empathy beyond showing a personal example? Outside of showing the personal example and maybe doing, like me, like I have a platform. And so I try to show a personal example and teach with a platform that I've earned a right for all of you who are here or watching this video, doing that. I think that is, Dan, about what we can do. I think outside of that, I think we start dictating to people what they have to do or telling everybody where they're wrong or trying to make people be what we want. And that doesn't work. So show a personal example. If you can set standards, if you have a team, set those standards. But ultimately, I also believe in freedom and free choice. So if people choose not to do these things or choose to operate differently, I'm going to be empathetic for the fact that they made a choice different than what I thought works. And that's okay. I hope it works out for them. That's what empathy is. And empathy, yeah, Coach Rubio talked about empathy versus expectation, having to do this with distance learning. Yeah, find a way to get the work done, whether now or later. Yeah, it's just a... I've said it a bunch of times here. Raising your empathy does not mean you sacrifice anything else. It's simply adding in, finding out what's important to them and making it important to you in a way that they feel it and value. And you can do that any moment that you choose. Which leads us really well into tomorrow. And tomorrow's discipline, the next discipline, day 7, is the simple skill of listening, which is the mechanics of and the number one demonstration of empathy itself. And so I hope you enjoyed today. If you're watching on a replay, I hope you get a chance to catch us live and jump in so we can get into these Q&As. What's up, Todd? See you in here. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much. I hope you have an amazing Sunday, and I will see you all tomorrow for the simple skill of listening.